Hello, Namaste, and Jai Hind, and welcome to another episode of the Nancoverse podcast. Today is the 28th of November, and I hope my listeners are having a good day. No matter where you are, I hope this brings a smile to your face. So, the first story that I want to read is about agriculture. Food affects us all. Food is what we start our day with, and food is what we end our day with, at least for us Punjabis. I am Punjabi and I love food. This story is about agriculture. Majorly, it's also about the factors of technology that affect the productivity of agriculture in India. We must have all heard about the green revolution that happened in the 60s that led to a productivity increase for the farmers, and we were able to achieve sustainability as a country in a very important in a very important sector. As a nation, we have been able to be not just sustainable in agriculture in terms of being able to feed our population, but also be an exporter. Agreed, there are issues with agriculture today in terms of the sustainability for the land, in terms of sustainability of the water. However, we have come a long way, and this article kind of talks about the history of it. The crux of it goes into how are we able to get more crop per acre, per farm hand, and per drop of water. So the productivity is what's being discussed in this article, and that's very interesting to me. And I would like to read a little bit about it and bring it to you guys. This is a story by Harish Damodaran in the Indian Express, and it talks about the 4 factors of technology, which are genetics, crop nutrition, crop protection, and agronomic intervention, have managed to boost agricultural growth in India despite the shrinking area of cultivable land. So the shrinking area of cultivable land, like the cultivable land is lesser, however the productivity of that lesser land is more, thanks to a lot of intervention by science and these 4 factors, which are genetics, crop nutrition, crop protection, and agronomic interventions. Let's get into it. In agriculture, there are 4 what economists would call factors of production, and these are not factors of technology, these are factors of production, which are basics: land, water, labor, and energy. Farmers use these factors or inputs to produce crops. For a given level of technology, the output produced by them is largely determined by the quantity of inputs used. कि जितना डालोगे उतना ज़्यादा मिलेगा type of thing. That's the sort of mentality that factors of production come up with. In the pre-Green Revolution era, agricultural production was primarily limited by the extent and quality of land available for cultivation. India's farm sector, according to a Niti Aayog paper by Ramesh Chand, grew by an average of 2.8% a year during 1950 to 1961-62. So in the first decade of independence, our area of under cultivation grew by 3%, almost 2.8%. The driver was expansion in the land brought under plough. The country's net sown area rose from 118 lakh to 135 lakh hectares over this period. So there was a lot of increase in the area under cultivation in the first decade of independence. Agricultural land quality is a function of soil fertility and water availability. The alluvial soils in the Indo-Gangetic plains and the Kaveri, Krishna, Godavari, and Mahanadi deltas of the eastern coast are the most fertile, followed by the black cotton soils of Deccan, Malwa, and Saurashtra plateaus. Somehow I always remember this, that black soil is always for cotton. I don't know why I remember this, but I just remember. It's like the mitochondria discussion somehow. But anyway, these yield more crops per acre than the lands with red, brown, laterite, mountain, and desert soils, ranked in descending order of fertility. Red soil you will often find in Goa, if you guys have if you guys have observed that. Yeah, Goa baby, I miss Goa, woo! Water availability is dependent on both rainfall and access to irrigation from rivers, lakes, tanks, and ponds. The great ancient civilizations came up mostly in river valleys that could sustain vibrant agriculture. If you know there is a river, there's going to be a civilization around. as Bear Grylls would find a river at the end of his episode and be like, "Yeah, I have been saved." So the great ancient civilizations came up mostly in river valleys that could sustain vibrant agriculture. As regards labor and energy in traditional agriculture, the more the farm hands and bullocks there were to work the land, the more the produce was harvested. Before the arrival of tractors, threshers, harvesters, combines, and electric diesel engine driven tube wells, the main energy source in farms were bullocks, which is gai or bhais basically in Hindi. They plowed the fields, traded the crops to separate the grain from chaff, and powered the Persian wheels to draw water from the wells for irrigation. So before there was a lot of mechanization, there were bullocks. That's bullocks. Factors of technology. Now we come to the factors of technology versus the factors of land. Factors of production versus factors of technology. Now we get to the factors of technology. Just as the 4 factors of production, there were 4 what one may term factors of technology in agriculture. The factors of technology enable more efficient use of the factors of production. They result in higher yields, more produce from the same acre of land or number of laborers, besides better utilization of water resources and replacement of animal and human power with mechanical and electrical power. The 4 factors of technology are genetics, crop nutrition, crop protection, and agronomic interventions. So we'll get to genetics first. Genetics is about seeds and plants breeding. There would have been no green revolution without the high yielding wheat and rice varieties in the Norman Borlaug, Henry Becquerel, Gurdev Singh Kush, and other scientists spread. These varieties incorporated dwarfing genes. This is very interesting. When I was reading this, they actually dwarfed the genes of the plants so that they did not fall. But I would read this to you guys for better understanding. These varieties incorporated dwarfing genes that reduce the height of the plants. Traditional varieties having tall and slender plants didn't respond much to the fertilizer or water application. When their ear heads were heavy with well-filled grains, they bent over or fell flat on the ground. The new semi-dwarf varieties had strong stems that held the grain-bearing panicles upright even when heavily fertilized, enabling them to absorb more nutrients and convert these to grains. So earlier we had a little bit more tall and slender plants, and now we have small pudgy but strong stemmed plants which don't fall to the ground. That's a subjective discussion if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I would like my grains to be tall and slender because I think tall and slender sounds a lot better than short and dwarfed. But it is what it is. Just as with reduced height, semi-dwarfing, there are genes in plants that code for proteins responsible for disease and pest resistance, drought and heat stress tolerance, nutrient use efficiency, or even stem sturdiness, and erect compact canopy to allow mechanical harvesting. The genetic information for all these desirable traits is contained in the seeds of the plant varieties, hybrid, developed through cross-breeding and agricultural biotechnology tools. Farmers traditionally reared cattle for not just draught power and milk, but also their excreta that provided the nutrients necessary for plant growth. Basically like cow cakes, like I'm sure a lot of people must have seen this, cow dung cakes. Farmyard manure, the decomposed mixture of dung and urine along with other farm residues, contains NPK, which is nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium in very small trace amounts, 0.5% nitrogen, 0.2% phosphorus and 0.5% potassium. The revolution in crop nutrition happened with chemical fertilizers having much higher NPK content. Urea 46%, diammonium phosphate 18 and 46%, and muriate of potash 60%. NPK is the foundation of fertilizers in India today. Artificial fertilizers made a big difference. Synthetic fertilizers in combination with the breeding of varieties responsive to high nutrient doses led to a soaring of crop yields. Farmers also saved on labor in maintaining animals and collecting, storing and composting their manure. The fertilizers came from factories in bagged, ready to use form, which they still do and are subsidized quite heavily. With higher yields also came technologies for crop protection, defending plants against insects, pests, pathogens, and weeds from the time of their sowing to harvesting and marketing. Crop protection chemicals are aimed at ensuring that the yield gains from genetics, breeding, and nutrition fertilizers are realized to the maximum possible extent. In farmers' fields, some are labor saving as well. Herbicides, for instance, can replace the manual removal of weeds. I don't know if any of my listeners has practiced a little bit of farming anywhere. Weeds are actually a big problem for farms because they just grow. Basically, it's land and things grow. So herbicides help with weeds and weed removal. The last factor of technology is mechanization and other agronomic interventions. Tractors, apart from rendering bullocks redundant, having made it possible to use implements such as rotavators, reversible mold board plows that can do deep tillage, mixing and pulverization of the soils and break their hard pan layers. There's a lot of mechanization that has happened in agriculture as well. Agronomic interventions also extend to water saving technologies, drip irrigation, and laser land levelers. I've never heard of this. Laser land levelers, interesting. And intercropping, or growing more than one crop simultaneously on the same piece of land. Farmers today are cultivating pomegranates in Rajasthan's arid desert soils through drip irrigation and water-soluble liquid fertilizers. Damn surely these Rajasthan farmers are really getting it together, and they're growing pomegranates in Rajasthan. Intense. There are similarly those using tractor-drawn machines to make raised beds in fields. They plant sugarcane on the furrows and various short cycle crops such as potato, onion, garlic, vegetables and pulses on the raised beds. Intercropping, growing different types of crops on the same piece of land. There are many benefits of this, at least theoretically is what I know. The next game changer, even if they're bearing fruit in Indian farms may take time, could be drones for spraying fertilizers and agrochemicals, and sensors for real-time monitoring of crop and field conditions. So drones can be useful not just for delivering your Domino's pizza, they can also be useful for delivering fertilizers to the wheat that makes the Domino's pizzas. I hope we have pizzas more than Domino's though, because I'm not a big fan. More productivity, output. The factors of technology, to use economics jargon, have, quote, shifted up the aggregate production function. In agriculture, instead of more output from more inputs, productivity increases have delivered more output from the same or even less levels of inputs. In other words, and very importantly, this was the most important line for me in the article, more crop per acre, per farmhand, and per drop of water. This is interesting as it's increasing the productivity of agriculture. This is being translated not just in agriculture, it's also happening in a lot of other fields. With the advent of artificial intelligence, this is happening in the corporate world as well. You need lesser people to do the same job, if not more. The effects can be seen from the net sown area in India rising by just 3.3% from 135 lakh hectares to 139.9 lakh hectares between 1961 and 2020. As against 14% during 1950 to 1961. So there was a 3% increase in 50 years versus a 14% increase in the first 10 years. So the increase in cultivated area has reduced, however the productivity has increased. The growth in agricultural production over the last 50 years or more has been mainly courtesy the factors of technology. Simply put, the factors of technology have trumped the factors of production. This was a really interesting article talking about how India became self-reliant in agriculture. There was a time when we were looking at scarcity in terms of food grade production. We were looking to import from different countries to feed a population as big as ours. During the 1980s, 70s, we had the Green Revolution, which was undertaken by the government, which has yielded a lot of food security for the people of India. It's subjectively a question of debate if it's a good thing in terms of, firstly, as we discussed, the dwarfing of the plants, which to me seems a little problematic somehow. However, the realities of the situations have got less to do with one person's subjective understanding versus a society's collective food security issue. So, the next story that I would like to read about is a story of culture. It's a story of a practice that's been happening in the south of India for the longest time. That has to do with bullocks again. We've been talking about bullocks. This is the Kambala event, which was recently held in Bangalore on the 25th of November. This is a story written by Akram M in the Indian Express, and it talks about how Kambala comes to Bangalore and how buffalo race's popularity outran the bans. Some of our listeners might have heard about how Jallikattu, I don't know if you guys have heard about this. Jallikattu was a practice done in Tamil Nadu, and it was banned basis some petitions filed by people calling it a cruel activity on the bullocks. And the Kambala event has a similar vibe where they race bullocks, and it's an event which is practiced in the southern parts of the country. This is an interesting one to me because I really feel sometimes people come and look at these things from a very moralistic and judgmental perspective. They feel like people don't. They feel like people who practice these things are uncouth and they are cruel to animals and they don't understand what it means to show compassion to animals. And the other side of the story is where people kind of feel that one should be allowed to practice their culture and allow, like, you might think that this is cruel, but the other people might think that this is a part of a tradition that has been there for the longest time. So they should be allowed to do this. And I have no opinion on this. I'm actually quite curious to see what Kambala is, what does it mean, how long has it been there for, and even read a little bit about Jallikattu and bring this to you for your own opinion. You can think what you want to think about this, but it happened and I do want to read about it. So Kambala comes back to Bangalore. The past weekend saw Bangalore hold its first Kambala race, with 159 pairs of buffaloes and their jockeys racing through the specially made slush tracks in the city's palace grounds. The final rounds of the races ended only by 2 a.m. on Monday. Damn, this goes late in the night. It's a late night party in Bangalore. Bangalore shuts down real quick. People from Bangalore would know, and this is on till 2 a.m., which sounds good. That one on a Monday, damn. Lakhs of people visited the venue to watch the event. Kambala has in the past been banned by the Supreme Court, but the Karnataka government, keeping its popularity in mind, amended legislation to allow the races to go on. India has its bodies of legislature, judiciary and executive. The judiciary banned it, the legislature did what it had to do to reenact it, basis its popularity. What is Kambala though? What is Kambala? That's a good question. It is a folk sport practiced in coastal Karnataka districts, especially in regions where Tulu speakers form a majority. In the past, races were hosted by various families and groups in sludgy fields in the days after paddy was harvested. More recently, various Kambala Samitis or organizing bodies have come up, which host weekly events from the end of November till the first half of April across Dakshina Kannada and Udupi districts. Kambala is a matter of prestige for many families, especially from the Bunt communities in the coastal areas. Pairs of buffaloes are groomed by them round the year in the hope of winning a Kambala event. This is where it is. I think when it's commercialized, it's the issue. It's these people who work with the buffaloes, they're actually emotionally connected to them. They rear them, they train them, they work with them, they're emotionally connected to the animal. This is something that people in the city don't really relate to. We just don't have buffaloes to take care of. We have pugs and dashhounds and golden retrievers, and we don't make them race. We don't even take them to the park sometimes, but that's a separate issue. What are the categories in Kambala? Kambala is generally held under 4 categories. First is Negelu, plow, translated to plow, where light plows are used to tie buffaloes for the race. The event is for entry level animals, lightweights. The second is Hagga, rope, where buffaloes are raced by jockeys with just a rope tying the pair together. The third category is Adda Halage, in which jockeys stand over a horizontal plank dragged by buffaloes. Thus, unlike Hagga and Negelu, where jockeys run behind the animals, in this buffaloes drag the jockeys. Kanne Halage is fourth category, where a wooden plank is tied to a buffaloes. The plank on which the jockeys stand has 2 holes through which water gushes out as the plank is dragged along the slush tracks. The height to which the water splashes determines the winner of the event. I hate to say this, but this sounds like so much fun. Like, imagine being surfed in this slush of water being driven by 2 beasts, and the height of which the water splashes determines the winner of the event. Interesting. There is even a picture here which I would like to put up. There is a very strong man wearing underwear with like some very beautiful bullocks which are running, and they have like a lot of things on their face. Like, it kind of looks like it's been tied. It looks bad. I can understand why people would feel for these animals. The animals can't speak for themselves, but it is a tradition, and it's been happening in the coastal areas of Karnataka for a very long time. Anyway, is Kambala popular across Karnataka? That's a question. It's a legit question. Though the popularity of the races is restricted to coastal Karnataka, the Bengaluru organizers believe that movies like Kanthara have given the event a pan-Karnataka appeal. Due to the success of the movie, many people are interested in learning more about the folk sport. Puttur and MLA Ashok Rai, one of the main organizers of the event, said, politicians have gotten involved and they want to make this a pan-Karnataka thing. This is mostly a coastal Karnataka sport. To ensure that more teams participated in the Kambala at the state's capital, an incentive of 50,000 was offered to bring the buffaloes to Bangalore for the event. Why was Kambala outlawed in the first place? Several organizations, including People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, had filed pleas against all traditional sporting events, complaining about animal abuse. That's the core issue. People feel that this is animal abuse. The complaint against Kambala was that the buffaloes' noses are tied with a rope and the animals are whipped continuously during the race. That's what a corporate day looks like for me, to be honest. Which amounts to cruelty. The Supreme Court, which heard the petitions, ruled to ban Jallikattu, Kambala and bullock cart racing in 2014. So then how was the ban lifted? In January 2016, the Environment Ministry issued a notification where an exception was made, saying, quote, bulls might be continued to be trained as performing animals at events such as Jallikattu in Tamil Nadu and bullock cart races in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Punjab, Haryana, Kerala and Gujarat in the manner, or practiced traditionally under the customs as part of culture in any part of the country. This exception was made subject to certain conditions aimed at reducing the suffering of the animals being used for such sports. At the same time, state governments amended provisions of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act to provide an exemption for these events. Though this was challenged, a 5-judge constitutional bench upheld the amendments made by Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra in May this year. See, I'm not saying if this is right or wrong, but what I'm saying is the contradiction in the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, and then you just kind of like let it happen. It's really strange that sometimes bills, what they're named, they actually enact the exact opposite. It reminds me of the bill that the United States had passed after 9/11. They called it the Freedom Bill or something like that. And that actually gave the government the power to snoop on everyone. Governments are fun, governments are powerful, and over here we have a very interesting event that happened in Bangalore, and it was nice to read about this. I would like to know more about Kambala. Do you guys know anyone who's seen this? Do you know anyone who's practiced this? even Jallikattu for that matter. In the article, it also said that this is being practiced in other states of the country. I can imagine wherever agriculture is a thing, riding your bullocks must be a sport as well. You're emotionally connected to these animals. We're so far off from such animals in the city. We don't know where our milk comes from. We don't know where our grains come from. We have no idea about these things. We just go to a store and buy our stuff and just be happy about it. We blinketed these days. Sitting in our homes, we know where the egg is coming from. We have never met the chicken. It was interesting reading both the stories today. One was about agriculture and one was about traditional folk sport that is being practiced in Karnataka and other parts of the country. It really brought to me a lot of like understanding of how diverse our country is, how diverse the practices are, how much are we actually in tune with what's happening in the world around us as well. Do we even know how we've gotten to where we are? Sometimes what we think is the right thing is actually not the right thing according to one part of the community, and when we actually have to empathize with those people who practice these things, we get to understand why is it important. Sometimes to an environmental activist it might seem like using a lot of fertilizers is a bad thing. For a farmer who needs to feed his children and actually pay for their education, they need to use the fertilizers so that there's production, so that there's productivity. We have had welfare schemes in fact they're on right now, Pradhan Mantri Anna Yojana, where we are providing free food grains to the poor people. Where does those food grains come from? They come from the farms. They come from people who grow them. I'm not saying that these things are right or wrong, but I do feel that we should know about them. So this was quite interesting to read the stories for today. Yes, it was quite interesting. So this marks the end of today's Nancoverse episode, today's Nancoverse podcast. I hope you guys liked the episode. I hope you guys were able to get some value from what I read. If you like the podcast, a great way to support it would be to like the video on YouTube and to follow the podcast on Spotify. You can find the follow link on the top when you click on the icon of the podcast. You can even drop a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts if that is where you're listening to the thing. And if you like the content of the podcast, of the episode, you may even hit the subscribe button. That would be a great zero-cost way to support the episode and the podcast. Share it with a friend that you think might also like it. And if you guys are having a good day, I really am happy for you. And if you're not, I would just say try smiling, try apologizing for anything that you need to apologize for. I certainly need to do that, so I can speak from empathy. There are times in our lives when we don't know what the right thing to do is, but if we really sit down with our thoughts, close our eyes, we know what the right thing to do is. We know how to treat the people right around our lives. The right answers come to us. We have the wisdom in us. And if there are things that you need to fix in your life, I would suggest that you take them on head on right now. This life is short and we are here for a good time, not a long time. Catch you guys in the next episode. Bye. Love you all.